Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Grand Prairie Chamber of Commerce Journey to Inclusiveness Chamber Series. We're very glad to have you all here. Today, we have one more time a wonderful presentation, a wonderful conversation with a very representative person of diversity here in Grand Prairie and for our chamber as well. Let me go ahead and introduce our speaker today. And as you have seen, she is Miss Lynn McGinley. And let me read her resume. She refers the following. Lynn McGinley was raised in Houston, Texas, and educated at University of Texas at Austin, receiving honors and her degree in business management and international business from Norwood University in Cedar Hill with the highest honors. She's married to Brian, and give me 1 second. Technology sometimes doesn't work too well. Okay. And she's married to Brian McGinley of Bloomington, Minneapolis, and they have 2 boys, Matthew and Andrew, and a beautiful soul in their granddaughter Anna. And yes, all of her tattoos are spelled correctly. Lynn began her career at Southwestern Bell Telephone as the parent company. AT&T was facing divestiture. During her tenure at SWBT, she represented her company on the board of the Cedar Hill Chamber, where she eventually served as the chairman of the board. Thus began her love affair with nonprofit work. After her retirement from the company, then called SBC, where she served as an executive director in the national wholesale market, she continued to volunteer. Lynn eventually served as president CEO of both the Duncanville and the Grand Prairie Chamber over her chamber work. She also served as president of the North Texas Chamber Executives in 2016 and as the vice chair of governance on the Texas State Chamber of Commerce Executives Board of Directors until 2018. Immediately upon her retirement from the Chamber of Commerce in 2017, Lynn was asked to join Asia Times Square as the Director of Operation and the President CEO of the Law Foundation. A few months later, she was awarded a contract with Grand Prairie ISD to assist with business and community partnerships for career technical education. This is when she formed LM Consulting, LLC. She currently balances these 3 positions. Lynn recently received her Master of Science degree in Management and Leadership from Western Governors University, graduating in the top 3 of her class. With that, I'm turning this over our speaker, Lynn McGinley.
Well, good afternoon. I'm glad she read my resume because I wanted you to hear that, because that's where that leads you through my life to my life now. And I'm going to talk to you about some things that might surprise you about the way I was raised and the way that that race was treated for Chinese Americans or children of mixed race during the 40s and 50s. So I've always heard that when you give a presentation, you should tell people what you're going to tell them, then you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. So I'm following that formula today. So here we go. First of all, number 1, I have a great and blessed life surrounded by those I love. Secondly, as a child growing up, due to many different factors, it was confusing in that time it was confusing being a child of mixed race. And third, I have a great and blessed life surrounded by those I love. This whole presentation may be a bit disjointed, but just stay with me. So last week at our Asia Times Square Cultural Ambassadors meeting, Matthew Lowe mentioned something that we should all be evident to us, but we don't stop to think about it much. Right now, we're hearing a lot about Asian hate, and we're hearing about Asians being attacked. and reported and read as if all this is new news. It really isn't new. All these things have been happening back since 1843, when the first Japanese started to work in the Hawaiian cane fields, or the first Chinese came to the mainland in 1850, came to the mainland in search of gold. So with all of this Asian hate and Asian attacks and things, Asia Times Square has recently formed the cultural ambassadors. In doing so, I was trying to think how we could create an environment where we could teach people to never make anyone feel like less just because of their race or their ethnicity. I realized that when you know somebody, when you know where they came from, when you know what they faced in life, it's much harder to judge them other than for the ways that they faced or overcame their adversities. So our goal at the ATS Cultural Ambassadors is to learn about each other. It's simply that. Each month we'll have a person of a different race or nationality talk about their story. We don't talk politics or race. We talk about who they are, what drives them, and what they do when they're not working. What games does their family play together? What holidays do they celebrate? And what do they eat? Of course, with Matthew, you have to talk about what they eat when the families come together. So then we learn that their families and ours are much more alike than different. I believe that this seed of seeing other people for anything other than equal human beings and as less only flourishes if it's fed. Children imitate children imitate until they can think for themselves. They do what they see, they do what they hear. There's a song from the musical South Pacific. I know most of you aren't old enough to remember South Pacific, but and it best describes racism and how it becomes a part of the thread of life in young people. And no, I'm not going to sing, so you're safe. Okay, so the lyrics go like this. You've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to be afraid of people whose eyes are oddly made, of people whose skin is a different shade. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught. Children imitate until they can think for themselves. They do what they see and hear. So looking at this presentation today, I'm going to share with you some snippets of my life, my journey of inclusiveness, growing up as a mixed race child in an unenlightened world. And the disclaimer is that most of these things happened in the 40s and 50s. I'm going to tell you about these things, not because I'm resentful, but because as a young child and throughout my teens, these incidents taught me that I was less than. So most of these stories have not even been related to people close to me, but I think it's time for people to understand how powerful their words and actions can be during the formative years. So the photos are just for fun, or so you can see me in a different light, or so that your attention can be taken away from the fact that I'm using a script. Oh, and don't worry, the story has a great ending. So if we can share the screen, Maria.
Yes, you can go ahead and do it.
Okie doke. Here it is. So can you see the first slide? Because I don't know what y'all see.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. This was my family growing up. My mother is the tall one in the back because she is the first of 7. I'm getting there, just a second. At age 75, I'm grateful for the blessings God's given me. I grew up a quiet and shy bookworm, never feeling comfortable in my own skin. So why? Well, that's my story today. My grandfather migrated from China about 1919 after he built a business in Arkansas. He actually came over, then he built his business, then he went back to China to marry his bride, and he brought her back to the US. My mom, the beautiful, sweet, funny, and kind Lina, was the oldest of 7. Her name on her birth certificate is Linoy. In Chinese, that means honest and uncorrupted love. Isn't that beautiful? Now, you may be surprised to hear that my mother attended black schools because being Chinese back in the 1920s, she wasn't allowed to go to white schools. And in high school, one of her teachers told her that she was in America, so she could not use her Chinese name. It was just too hard to say. So the teacher refused to call her by her birth name, Linoy, and called her only by Lina, thus chipping away at her Asian identity. My mother eloped with her white boyfriend right after graduating valedictorian of her class and after turning down a great job offer in Washington, D.C. This was devastating to my grandparents and to her siblings. The first violence I personally encountered was in the womb. After the birth of my older sister, my father didn't want another mixed race child, so he threw my mother down a flight of stairs in an effort to abort me. Several other attempts were made, but God must have had a plan for my life even then. My sister suffered pure racism when she was only 1 year old. She had a terrible case of pneumonia. My mom rushed her to the nearest hospital, but was denied entrance because she was not white. As my sister was literally gasping for air, Mom was pointed to the Black hospital 45 miles away. My mother divorced my abusive grandfather in 1946, and we moved with my grandparents and the rest of the aunts and uncles who were now in Houston. We all lived in a 3-bedroom house connected to the grocery store. My mom remarried when I was about 4, and our last name was changed to Wang. So now I have 2 Chinese parents. I know this all seems crazy in 2021, but it was never overt racism. It happened in small, seemingly insignificant ways. I was raised to be humble, to be kind, to think of others before myself, to work hard, and if I didn't achieve my dreams, I had only myself to blame. The 5th grade class was going to be on a TV show called Art Cart, where we were going to draw and explain our drawings as we drew. 6 students were selected. I was one of them, until they found themselves writing down last names. After my last name was written down, there was a short conference among the TV staff and my teachers, and there were suddenly only 5 spaces on the show, and their regrets that I couldn't appear. This and other little disappointments chipped away again at my belief that people would treat you the way that you treated them. Grade school, I was teased and bullied because my last name was Wong, which is wrong. And then there was The World of Susie Wong, which was a movie about a prostitute, a girl of loose morals, and parents told their kids all kinds of things about Chinese people after that. Then, when there was a vote for outstanding 6th grade student, the vote was actually split, which was amazing in itself that I got half the votes. Then my opponent voted for herself. I, of course, voted for her as well because that was the way I was raised. She said she voted for herself because I didn't have enough self-confidence to vote for myself to be the outstanding student. In 1955, when my parents were looking to buy a house closer to our restaurants, the realtor proudly announced to us not to worry because before selling us the house we chose, they canvassed the neighborhood to make sure it was okay for a Chinese family to live there. At that time in Houston, there were few Chinese families. If you saw a Chinese person on the street, they were your close kin or your distant kin, or someone you knew from Chinese Baptist Church, or from the Chinese American Citizens Alliance, a small community. It was an amazing time for us to grow up in that community. Dating was always hard for my sister and I. Chinese parents we knew didn't want their sons to date us because, well, we were white. And white parents didn't want their sons to have anything to do with us because we were Chinese. So we were fortunate enough to have a lot of group outings with my Chinese cousins and friends. And oh, on a side note, I was 5'4" and could never wear heels because Chinese boys are short. And so it was so much fun. And I've kept all those friendships all these years. We went to Chinese school on Saturdays, and when they teach you in China, or when they used to teach you in China, it was all by rote, so you would memorize the books. So if you are in a room today with any of my friends that shared that experience with me, and one of us starts to chant that book, we will soon have a whole group of people chanting that book because you cannot get it out of your mind. So maybe rote memory is not a bad thing. One of my friends married outside the Chinese race, and her father not only disowned her, the family actually had a funeral for her. I've since heard and read about these kind of things, but at that time I just couldn't fathom it. Growing up, my Chinese grandmother would always deny that we were half white. She would tell us we were not. She and my aunts and uncles looked down on whites and blacks and browns. So I guess I became increasingly ashamed of the fact that I was half white, and I really didn't like being half Chinese. I was asked to be on a dating panel later in life, and I remember telling a room full of Chinese teens that mixed marriages were not a sustainable thing. I did date some white men later in my life, and I broke up with them simply to win the approval of my extended family. All of that was mostly my school and up until high school. When I was in my senior year, we moved to Las Vegas and I graduated high school there. Okay, so I threw in my prom photo because it's a rite of passage and because my date was really cute, and also because I had hand beaded French lace when I made this dress as I was going for that Jackie Kennedy look. In my early 20s, I had that Eurasian look that everyone was going after, and my cousin, Linda G, and I were featured in a news article on campus at UT in Austin. I can't remember why us, but interestingly enough, she still looks the same. But all of that was then, and this is now. I believe that God is in charge of my life and that all these things brought me to this time in my life. Until I went off to college and met a white guy who was enamored with Asian arts and philosophy and treated me like I was worthy, I really didn't like my Chinese self. So a white man taught me my Chinese heritage was something beautiful to be proud of. I will forever be grateful to him for that. Today, I have cousins whose children are married outside their race and grandparents who love their grandchildren, and those mixed race marriages are blessed. When I go home to Houston and go to Chinese Baptist Church, I see every race, ethnicity, and culture celebrated there. Today, I work at Asia Times Square and am blessed to be able to go to work every day to further our mission, preserving traditions and promoting culture. My life experiences have taught me to never judge a person by the color of their skin. I'm proud to say that my boys have never judged people by their race, but only by the way they treat other people. This is my whole point for this whole presentation. Civilization can and must evolve. We each have a personal choice to be part of the evolution or to push against it. My message today is not about systematic racism, but about small things that chip away at our confidence in our fellow man. Being a young person of mixed race in an unenlightened world left its mark on me, yes, but it also created in me a strong core belief that I will not treat another human being as less than myself because of their race. and that I grew up so fortunate to be a Chinese American child of God in this amazing and diverse world. I hope that you found a kernel of truth to touch your heart today. I feel blessed every day to live the life that I've had the privilege to live. It brought me to here, to this place, to this time today to share that with you. Thank you.
Amazing, Lynn. Thank you for
Very good.
sharing.
Thank you for
Lynn.
listening. Some of those things I really wasn't sure that I could share,
I bet.
but I think that this is the time to share those things. Well, for some reason, oh wait, stop share. That's what I want. There we go.
Beautiful, beautiful story.
Thank you. Maria, it's back.
Ma'am. I'm trying not to cry.
All right.
I know, I only got hit when I started talking about my mom.
Does anybody has a
So what
comment,
questions do you
question?
have?
Yes, go ahead.
No questions, I covered everything.
So you
Well,
have,
I'll ask a question because, you know, I have mixed race babies, right? My oldest son is Pakistani. My youngest son is African American. So any advice you have of a mom raising mixed race babies?
That's a good question. I always thought about, what was important for me to teach my kids. And I think it was not talking about race, it was talking about people. And when I know when my kids would talk about their friends, they wouldn't say the black kid down the street. They would say, Justin, he lives in that house down there with the red door. You know what I mean? So I think that's the thing. I think it's really interesting to watch. Well, I call them my babies, my kids, but they're in their 40s now. But to watch them now, because just like me and just like you, they get upset with people, and there are certain people they don't like. But it never has to do with their race. It has to do with literally how they treat either my kids or how they treat other people. And so that's the only thing I think I can bring to you. I also think it's important for people to get to know that different cultures are so similar to our own, that at the core, the good parents of every culture are teaching their children what's right, or teaching their children, to respect everybody and to value everybody. So I don't know, that's pretty much what I would say.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, Lynn.
Mhm.
You had mentioned at the beginning that the bad feelings and the racism towards Asians was not new, that had been going on for years.
Mhm.
Do you feel like it's gotten worse, stayed the same? What is your feel for that?
My feel for that is that you'll never know. And that's because Asians don't talk about those things. They take them home, they deal with them on themselves. They probably, hold that inside themselves, don't even talk sometimes to their children about it unless it's obvious. And they grow to dislike whatever race that was that perpetrated that on them.
So the fact that it's in the news right now.
I just don't, I hate that for us, but that's certainly true. There's a lot, I want to say there's 7% domestic violence in Asian relationships, and you don't ever hear about it. You very rarely hear about it. And if it's really, really bad, they might go to their family, but usually they're too embarrassed to go to their family. My mother was too embarrassed to get out of her first marriage. So we stayed until I was a year old. And then, thank God, she called my grandfather and said, I'm leaving. and he sent my uncle to go back to Arkansas and get her. Her second husband was typically Asian, but he was very, I don't know how to describe it, but he was also abusive in different ways. I think he only physically abused her. He threw her against a wall once. But my mom was too embarrassed again to tell her family. She went to the preacher. She went to the preacher's wife at the church, and the preacher's wife was Caucasian because we came from Houston Baptist, First Baptist Church, and we were a mission. So we had a Caucasian minister and his wife. They were very young, just starting out, beautiful, beautiful people. And she went to this young 20-something-year-old and said, my husband's abusing me. I don't know what to do. And they really tried to stick with the understand Asian culture. And they told her that she was fortunate that a Chinese man would marry her with 2 mixed race children, and that and after all, she wasn't a virgin, and that she needed to go back to him. And I will tell you, there were some instances that I can't even talk about right now that were really bad with him, but she left him in my senior year in high school. That's why we moved to Las Vegas because my mom got out of that relationship. So in my senior year in high school, I spent in a new school, but I want to tell you, it was one of the most amazing years of my life.
Awesome.
It was the first time I dated a Caucasian boy.
I think it's incredible story, and incredibly brave of you to share it with us. But I think the most incredible thing is what a wonderful person you've turned out to be, despite all the things that you could have full of hatred and vengeance and to raise. I've met at least one of your kids, and they're remarkable kids too. So
You've met one of my kids?
At the Santa picture thing.
Oh, Andrew. Oh, yeah.
Years ago. I'm just so impressed, Lynn.
Oh, well, please be impressed with my parents, with my mom, and the way that my family raised us, because we were quite fortunate, and she was a wonderful mom. Any other questions?
I got to meet your mom years ago at a chamber event, and she was such a nice, very proper lady, and I really enjoyed meeting her. And of course, I know your 2 boys, so I think you've done a tremendous job. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You never know as a parent,
Yeah, you hope for the best, right?
I never know. Andrew once told me, Mom, we know what to do when you're not there. I said, oh, so you only do it when I'm not there? He goes, pretty much. Yeah.
Well, I
Any
consider
other
you a
question?
wonderful role model.
Oh, yeah, I think Brian had a lot to do with it. We met late in my life, early in his life. Brian is 15 years younger than I am. I had to think there. Now, see, I hate that. I hate that, Patty.
I'd be proud of it, but that's just me.
We
I'm
met
sorry.
and became friends and have remained friends throughout our marriage. He was raised very differently than I was. I was raised, you give your kids everything. He was raised with parents that were strict, but brought up 2 amazing people. So I think it was a good mix, although it wasn't always a agreeable mix. Yeah.
I don't know if you're seeing chat, but Sarah said she lost her sound. She said technology on the go, gotta love it. Great presentation, but she has a question. And her question is, how come she wasn't included in the family photo?
She's the black sheep of the family. You know. Sarah, I hired Sarah. Actually, Brian told me to hire Sarah. I hired Sarah when she was in her early 20s, and she was working at Maztec, which was a company. They built something or another. I don't know what she did there, but I knew that she was creative, and I knew that she was a hard worker. And I was looking when I went to the Duncanville Chamber. I hope it's no reflection on me, but the whole staff quit. So we had nobody. So I called a girlfriend of mine and I said, Carolyn, go over there and sit in that chair for 2 weeks because I have to fulfill my 2 weeks, you know, with the Grand Prairie Chamber, where I was working with Radonna at the time. And so she did. And then I had to hire somebody. And I told Sarah, I said, if you come to work with me at this chamber, you will have more fun than you've ever had at a job in your life. It'll be hard work, but we'll do it together and it'll be fun. And she and I, we are very like souls, believe it or not, except she's like the nice version and I'm like the bitchy version. But she is just such a joy. And I'm so happy to have her as my friend. And I hope she's not listening because I don't want her to get a big head. But I will tell you, in this group, the person who is most like me is Aniska Douglas. She is my sister from another mister. I got to tell you, we think so much alike. So, what else? What other questions?
Well, I'm going to put in a plug here. I had the fortune of being at the first inaugural Nesian Ambassador meeting on Sunday, and it was so much fun. And Lynn plays a huge integral part in that, in bringing the community together. And the really cool thing I liked about it, she and Matt both were very welcoming to anybody and everybody, including children. So Amber, you had asked, you know, about maybe your kids. There were children there that actually spoke and told some of their viewpoints on things. And then there was an hysterical game with some coconut between your legs running down a race. So I think that y'all need to at least attend one meeting and see we are so alike in so many different ways that it's unbelievable, because people shouldn't put wedges just because cultures are different or they have different beliefs or things that they do, because it was way fun. I talked with several people and met some new friends. So the next meeting, I do hope y'all can come and see what you think about it. But thank you, Lynn, for you and Matt for doing that, because that was really a ton of fun and I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. That's what we want it to be. The next meeting we're going to hear from, he's actually a pastor, and he came and brought his wife here from Nigeria, and they have a family of, I want to say 5 kids. And as I understand it, every child in this family is just extraordinary. One of them I've taken under my wing. I love her like a daughter. And I'm getting to know the second child, but and they volunteer for us a lot. So he's going to speak in June, and then July we have the lovely and talented Maria Santi, who's going to speak. And then in August we're going to have a gentleman, Jamal Amil, who's going to speak. He's from Bangladesh, and so each time we do this, we'll have a game and some snacks from that specific country. So we want it to be fun, and we don't want it to be about anything other than just getting to know somebody on a different level.
Well, if there is no more questions, Lynn, thank you so much for sharing your story. We know you, we see you because you are well known in Grand Prairie, but knowing about you and knowing all these things is very, very valuable. And we truly enjoyed, and I'm speaking for everybody, we truly enjoyed your story. And the thing, obviously, that you left in this chamber was that path of loving diversity, loving cultures, and that always being respectful, and of course, being able to work with with any kind of race, any kind of culture in this chamber world. And proof of that, it was to hire a Mexican that barely spoke English. That was me. Thank you, Lynn.
Oh my, it was my privilege to hire you, Maria.
Thank you so much. So if there is no more questions, we're adjourned.
Thank you. Bye, ladies.
Bye-bye.